Good morning, I'm Melissa Meeks and I'm going to debrief yesterday's peer learning activity. Let's start by remembering how Eli works. You completed a small bit of writing on Monday, you gave feedback on Tuesday, and today we're focusing on processing and debriefing feedback. Tomorrow you'll build a revision plan and perhaps you would revise. In a course, we could repeat these steps building from where we ended or starting a new project. I want to put the emphasis on processing and debriefing feedback because, as Dylan William explains in his article, The Secret of Effective Feedback from ASCD, the only important thing about feedback is what students do with it. In debriefing, our goal is to inspire revision, to help writers see their drafts differently because of the criteria of the assignment and what they can see in others' drafts. The writing task was simply to compose a syllabus blurb or talking points, and it had no criteria about length or other content because participants in this course are diverse. You can tell from the drafts you've read that we have very different ideas about what a syllabus should sound like and what kind of information it should contain. In this review, I wanted to document the different ways people might approach the pitch for peer learning to students and give us a sense of what's possible. Most reviews are built around criteria announced in a writing task, but this review had very few criteria, so this one is built around options. The first set of options connects peer review to larger course goals, to the instructor's personal pedagogy, and to students as learners or future professionals. The second set covers the pedagogical principles in the readings. Because we're interested in peer learning pedagogy, we wanted to see which of these ideas bubbled up in the ways you're describing peer learning to your students. The third set acknowledges that students bring to peer learning quite a bit of emotional baggage. Getting them to a more positive place with higher expectations of peer learning takes intentional conversation. This checklist is just a way of marking that need as part of the work of building a culture of feedback in your classroom. The rating scale is designed to get groups to nominate a peer exemplar for discussion, and I'll do that in a minute. The comment prompt reinforced Describe, Evaluate, Suggest and provided a model, which was designed to nudge reviewers in giving great feedback aligned to the criteria above. In short, the review task is a map for revision. It describes a landscape of possibilities for writers to revise. It is not prescribing that writers do X, Y, or Z to achieve a specific goal, which is often a good strategy for a review. But this one is really more informative and generative. It's laying out the options. The second strategy of inspiring revision relies on the zone of proximal development. Before we work through the data together, remember this image from the videos you watched on Monday? This is a little dancer who looks to the side and sees another little dancer doing the right move, so she makes adjustments. In Eli, looking to your right and looking to your left and then making a slight adjustment happens when you see your own feedback. I'm showing the teacher view of an individual student's feedback report, but each of you have a report on the feedback you received and the feedback you gave. The feedback you received report itemizes what reviewers said about your draft. In these trait ID checklists, reviewers are saying, yes, I see a feature, or no, I don't see that feature, and the percentages indicate the rate of agreement among readers. The numbers are not an assessment of effectiveness, not a grade. It's an assessment of reviewers' agreement about whether they noticed the feature. Where you see 100%, both reviewers agree that that feature was present in the draft. Where you see 50% or less, that means one or more reviewers did not notice that feature. As you look at these numbers, the question to ask is, did the reader who missed that element just read too quickly, or is that element too subtle? Similarly, the class average tells you of all the drafts read by all the reviewers, how many reviewers noticed that feature. The class average tells you what's popular or dominant in the whole set of drafts, so you can decide how much you want to be like everyone else. In the scaled response items, you'll get both a rating and a comment if the reviewer included it. Use this feedback as food for thought. Food for thought about revision is important, but it's actions that matter most. Eli invites students to take 2 quick actions as they consider the feedback they've received. First, rate the helpfulness of each comment. Give 1 star for each yes answer. Does the comment describe your writing so that you understand what readers are getting from your paper? Does the comment help you evaluate your progress toward the assignment goals? And does the comment offer a specific suggestion that you can follow when you revise? If it has all 3 required moves for a helpful comment, then that comment should get 3 stars. The next 2 stars you can use at your discretion. A 4th star might be awarded for particular respect shown to your work or to you. I call that the kindness star. And the 5th star is reserved only for those comments that meet all of the previous criteria and help you transform your writing. So use the helpfulness scale to evaluate your comments and work through them carefully. As you rate the helpfulness, consider whether I've given the comment a blue thumbs up or not. I endorse comments that follow, describe, evaluate, suggest, and push the draft in a really good direction. This one decision about how helpful you find a particular comment flows back to the reviewer and to the instructor. In a low-stakes way, without affecting anyone's grade, writers can use the helpfulness rating to say, I'm getting what I need to revise from you, or not. Instructors can use that information to coach particular reviewers who are struggling to give helpful feedback. After you rate the helpfulness of a comment, your second decision is to decide whether to add it to your revision plan. On the student side, you have a button for a comment over the right side that says Add to Plan. When you click it, you'll choose which writing task this comment applies to, and then a copy of this comment is moved to the plan associated with this writing task. This decision initiates the revision plan. Later, I'll show you how to finish the plan. Eli's features are helping writers work through a decision-making process around each comment. How helpful was this comment to me in guiding my revision, and do I want this comment on my plan? These easy choices help writers spend more time thinking through revision. The third strategy for inspiring revision is to give students a perspective of what happened across the whole class. When you're working in a review group, you can only see the drafts that have been shared with you. From the instructor's vantage point, I can see what's happening across groups. And I want writers to have a full sense of what other people have been doing. I can do that by talking through the class data on the Writing Feedback tab. In this first checklist, it's clear that almost 90% of the drafts met the expectation of the assignment, which was to explain the value of peer learning to students as learners or as future professionals. If you didn't get full reader agreement on this particular item, that's your top revision priority. These other 2 options are simply options, and notice that about half the drafts covered each of those. So think about explaining peer review in relationship to course or department objectives, and certainly in your class you'll want students to know why you personally value peer learning. In the second checklist, we were looking for which ideas from the readings were bubbling up. And the top idea is this notion that feedback is formative, timely, descriptive, goal-referenced, and goal-directed. So the qualities of helpful feedback is the thing that most people talked about. And the second most important is the role of the instructor in coaching reviewers on how to give feedback and coaching writers on how to revise. So thinking about the instructor role in peer review is something that matters to this particular group. It's not surprising that few drafts talked about small bits of writing, but I saw in the comments that that was a suggestion by several different reviewers on several different drafts. You don't necessarily want to scare students with the workload on the first day of the course, but helping them understand that the approach to peer review in Eli is to make it a routine at every stage of the writing process rather than making it an end-stage activity. This last checklist reveals what kinds of fears or frustrations of peer review the drafts anticipated students bringing to this activity. And about 40% of the drafts reference students' self-doubt, and about 30% their resistance that, instructors should provide feedback, students shouldn't. So this is a checklist to use, maybe not to revise your syllabus blurb or your talking points for the first day, but it's a good list to keep in mind as you continue to raise students' expectations for the value of peer learning throughout the semester. The next question asks reviewers to nominate drafts for class discussion. Our class average is a little above 3, but not much, so that means I really trust that the 3 drafts appearing in the top slots are truly exceptional. So I'm going to show 2 of these and then 2 that I selected. This is a great time to pause the video and read the draft. This draft is the highest rated in this workshop. It begins by reminding students that academic peer review has a historical tradition focused on the conversation between scholars, which is in pursuit of truth or accuracy. It goes on to talk about how peer review can go wrong, but it's not because of training or experience, but it's about the sweat equity of each person in the process. And I think that's a really important point for beginning reviewers and novice writers. The next idea in this draft encourages students to not think about writers as working in isolation, but to recognize that writers work in community and that the classroom is creating that sense of community. The next move is to remind students that the peer review is part of their schedule and the grade. So there's a time element and a grade element to peer review, and both are really important. It continues by talking to students about how they should praise something, find a problem, and offer a suggestion by giving wild ideas, I love that, for further research, writing, persuasion. But this last idea is really an important one. Your work will be returned in kind and rewarded with a community of writers. That notion of reciprocity is at the core of how Eli's analytics work, and we give you reciprocity stats for each review and for the course as a whole. So if you get interested in reciprocity as a metric, I'm happy to talk with you. But I really like how this draft forwards it as a belief about one of the sweat equity components of effective peer review. This is the second highest rated draft by the reviewers who read it, and it does a couple of different things than the draft we read before. I'm going to focus on the part that follows from the activity header. And the first move here is to help students recognize that feedback, like writing, is unnatural, that it doesn't come easily to anyone. It's got to be taught and it's got to be practiced for there to be improvement. That is also really related to this notion that giving feedback is what drives writing success. So our team calls that giver's gain. Bill Hart Davidson coined this phrase, but it's really representing a body of literature that shows that students who give the best feedback to other students are the ones who end up revising the most. So you can take that idea and use it with students to talk about why in their comments they need to describe. So say something about the draft. Just summarize it, Peter Elbow style, movie of my mind. This is what I think you're trying to say and accomplish in this passage. And then evaluate. Say how well it's doing the thing the writer is aiming to do, and then to suggest. That creates a problem solution arc for the reviewer who's offering that suggestion. And so connecting problems with solutions is the mental muscle that will help writers improve drafts in other contexts. So Giver's Gain is really an invitation for students to practice offering a revision decision to other writers, and that's how Giver's Gain drives writers' own improvement. So when you look at this draft and you see this, the end goal is that by creating a feedback-rich classroom, what we're really doing is we're helping the conversation around drafts have really clear problem-solution relationships that help each student have a flexible toolkit to take beyond the class and beyond these particular genres of writing. That's what builds a writing skill. This third draft I picked because it has such a different frame than the other two that we've considered. Whereas the first draft focused on the history of peer review and the reciprocity at the core of it going well, and the second draft on the revision decision muscles that reviewers build when they offer, describe, evaluate, suggest feedback. This draft starts with the notion that writers really want readers to react or respond to their drafts. And so they have questions reviewers can answer. And I think that's a really powerful thing for you to include in your own pedagogy, to ask writers what do they want to hear from reviewers. To balance that, though, there's also the idea that instructors need to give specific questions that guide the ways reviewers talk to writers about the draft's end process. So this balance between writers having questions to ask that matter to them and instructors having priorities that matter to them. This is a great tension in this particular blurb to think about. The next idea that is powerful in this blurb is to remind students that simply being exposed to other writers' drafts is one of the powerful components. That's the zone of proximal development, right? If you can look around and see what other people are doing, then you are more aware of what your options are. And finally, this draft talks about students developing a habit of reflection about the feedback that they've received. And this workshop focuses mostly on peer feedback, not on revision plans. But if you'd like to talk more about ways of increasing students' abilities to deliberate the feedback they've received or to enhance their reflection on how they're going to approach their writing task, I'm happy to work with you because these things go together. Like the other one I picked, this draft covers some handles on peer learning that weren't covered by the first two. And this one opens with a reminder that peer review actually happens outside of school too. The second big idea in this draft is that there's a difference between editing and peer feedback. There's also a difference between evaluation and feedback. So I want to correct something. If you're going to pick up our language of describe, evaluate, suggest, the kind of I like this or this is good, that's evaluation because it is about how the reviewer is responding to the draft. That's evaluative. When you're describing the draft, you're just saying what the draft is doing in the most kind of clear and kind of paraphrasey kind of way. The next part of this draft that I think is really great is to remind students that they're going to see a lot of examples of helpful feedback, that modeling helpful comments is just as important as modeling effective drafts. So thinking about the role of modeling in peer feedback is great. And I want to finish the video by doing just that. So from the instructor side, I'm using the Review Feedback tab, which summarizes for me every comment between every single group. And I can reorder the list of comments in a variety of ways. This first comment, I've given the blue thumbs up to endorse how this comment follows describe, evaluate, suggest. You'll see a really clear point by point summary of what that draft was covering, and then we start the I likes. I found effectives, I found I likes. That's the evaluative move, and then here's the revision suggestion, right? And notice how it's hedged. I recommend that you consider rather than do this or do that. Those kind of hedges are really important for students to learn because they don't want to tell people what to do, but they don't know how to not sound like the teachers they've always heard. So helping students realize that these little phrases such as I recommend that you consider, or you might blah blah blah, or as a reader I'd like more blah blah blah. Those are ways of helping students get really good at giving feedback. Let me pull together all the different ways you can be inspired to revise your draft. In the checklists, consider what was popular and what you were missing. In the ratings, consider how evaluation helps you set goals. In the comments, rate the helpfulness of the comments you've received and add the best ones to your revision plan. Let me show you how to do the revision plan once you've added all the feedback from a review task. Use Home to navigate to your dashboard, and then click into the revision report. Your revision plan will have a set of instructions above, and it will also give you a link to a video that explains the technical steps for how to build a revision plan. Any comments that you've added from peers will appear in a list that you can drag and drop. So once you've got the comments on your plan from the review task, then you can drag and drop them in priority order. You can also add a note to explain how you are going to use that feedback. The note is addressed to you and to me as the instructor. In the additional notes section, this is a great place to add any other revision goals you have based on your work as a reviewer, based on this debriefing video, and based on any of the peer feedback that you didn't actually add to your plan but you still want to be influenced by. So once you've saved your note, submit it, and then I'll see it and give you feedback by the end of day Friday. So let me go back to home. In your dashboard, you're going to see a resubmit task as well. This is the last task of the week. I don't actually expect you to revise this blurb this week, but I wanted you to see how Eli takes your original writing and makes it available to you in the resubmit task. This feature makes it quick and easy to ask students to revise. This concludes the video on debriefing writing from the peer learning activity. I hope it was helpful for giving you a sense of how you can use Eli's features to make sure writers have the information they need to make good decisions about revising.